that somehow it's going to reduce the federal deficit, because that was the argument that was made at the time, and this is one of the reasons they were able to make that argument. I would suggest that there are probably lots of other gimmicks that we're going to uncover that are going to demonstrate that this thing is going to be way out of balance over time. But I would ask for his comments, being the ranking member of the Budget Committee.
Mr. President, Senator Thune deserves a lot of credit for pursuing this issue tenaciously and seeing his prediction validated now by President Obama's own secretary that this can't be a viable program. But you are exactly correct. One of the greatest financial misrepresentations in history, if it continues to be on the books, will be the contention that this health care bill would actually create money for the United States Treasury, actually produce a surplus. And they used a 10-year scoring model, $70 billion, about 60% or so of the total savings this bill is alleged to produce, not savings, actual revenue, net revenue increase, was this program. And now it's gone. And as Senator McCain correctly said, Judge Gregg deserves great credit for it, because what he did was he put it in the bill that the Secretary had to certify that this was a sound program. Certify that it was a sound program. And so after all the political smoke had been going on, after the bill had been passed, while they were defending it as a viable Class Act program that would actually produce revenue for the government, when she had to certify it, I suppose under penalty of perjury, could go to jail if she didn't do it correctly, she said she could not do so. It was never possible this bill was going to be a money maker for the United States Treasury, and they double counted maybe $300, $400, $500 billion in money. That's Medicare money, also counted as income to fund an entirely new bill. That's going to come out also. And as Senator Barrasso has noted, their estimates have been wildly inaccurate concerning the ability of the to bring the cost curve down, to actually reduce health care. This was something that a lot of people thought was a good idea. It's going to produce a reduction in our insurance benefits, and since the bill is passed, they've gone up dramatically, just the opposite of what was promised. So I think this is a death knell for the entire Obamacare concept. I mean, this is just one more example of it, and I think you and
I would say to my colleague, the thing that's a little bit hard to understand, and maybe Dr. Barrasso understands it, the Secretary of Health and Human Services said they can find no way to implement it after nearly 2 years. So why would there be an objection to Senator Thune's just move to repeal the Class Act? I mean, if they've tried for all of these months since the passage of the bill to figure out a way they can meet the Judge Gregg proviso that required 75-year sustainability, then one would wonder, thank you, one would wonder why, I thought shouting was enough. One would wonder why we wouldn't just go ahead and repeal it. And if there is a better proposal, as we've all agreed, to address the long-term care issue in America, then why don't we sit down and at the drawing board and find a way to care for people who in their most vulnerable years need government assistance. I know of no one in this body who is opposed to a viable, reasonable, fiscally sound long-term care program. This is not it. And that's not even close. So I wonder why my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would refuse to repeal it unless it's somehow some distorted pride in authorship.
Just say to our colleague from Wyoming, who is a physician and has a lot of experience on these issues, who comes down here every week with a second opinion talking about all the various issues regarding the health care bill, and the more recent one, as we've all seen now, is contrary to predictions, health care costs are going up. Predictions were that they would go down. That is also something that many of us saw coming. But just the question about, okay, if we leave this on the books, and if they decide at some point to resurrect it after they have already acknowledged that it doesn't work, but come up with some new language that does away with the Judd Gregg proviso on there, what are the fiscal consequences of this program being resurrected? I mean, you know, we've talked about this, and there were lots of predictions made at the time. In fact, Senator from Arizona, I think, had some of our colleagues who made statements on the floor at the time about how this was going to be a great deal and how it was going to work. The administration said at the time that this is not a budget gimmick. That's what they were quoted as saying. Clearly, this was a budget gimmick. We all know that now. It is a Ponzi scheme, at least clearly that's what the actuaries are saying at Health and Human Services. So if in fact we don't get this repealed and we end up at some point this program being resurrected, what are the fiscal consequences and implications for the country and for future generations who are going to be saddled with yet another unfunded liability, another entitlement program that isn't paid for?
Well, to my colleague, I would say I think this is devastating for the country, and I told the President directly that I thought that his proposal overall was going to bankrupt the country. You know, we stood here and debated over a year ago the fact that the Democrats in this body were voting to take $500 billion away from our seniors on Medicare, not to save Medicare, but to start a whole new government program for somebody else. And when we talk about long-term care and what people need over the course of their lifetime, they took money away from hospice. They took money away from home health. They continue to take money away from hospitals and the physicians who take care of our seniors. So,
popular Medicare Advantage program.
Which has an advantage because it coordinates care, does a number of things that are important. But I believe this is the reason why just last week in the Kaiser poll, the number of individuals who have a very favorable view of the overall health care law has dropped to 12%, an all-time low. The number of people who think now that this health care law that they will personally be better off under the health care law is only 18%, an all-time low. The number of people in the country who think that the country as a whole will be better off due to the health care law stands at 28%, an all-time low. So the American people realize that we need truth, honesty in budgeting, and I know my colleague from the Budget Committee is working on that, has had an op-ed that I read, has a proposal working on that. That's what the American people want. They want some honesty in budgeting, not the kind of politics and budget gimmicks and tricks that we see happening here. And the American people are tired of being misled and sold a bill of goods. They see through it, they don't like it, they don't want it, and that's why all of the polling on the health care law shows it at an all-time low.
Well, I would just say to my colleagues that I think what this suggests is, you know, we all saw this coming and we tried our best to prevent it, but now we know, and we've got these statements that came out as a part of the report that was done by the House and Senate, investigative report called Class Act, The Untold Story, and it was published in September, but what it revealed was that the Health and Human Services Department actuaries, the people who are really the experts, not the politicians, not those of us who were making many of these statements during the political debate that we were having here in the Senate, but the people who actually are responsible for doing the math on this came up and said that they called the CLASS program a recipe for disaster, and those were in internal emails that we discovered when we were doing this investigation. And prior to their announcement in October that HHS isn't moving forward with the CLASS program at this time, Secretary Sebelius and other officials at the Health and Human Services Department claimed through much of 2011 that the department had sufficient authority to modify it. What they were trying to suggest is that we can make this work, and yet these internal documents cast significant doubts on all of those assertions. And in fact, and I'll repeat this again because I think it's important, the chief actuary during 2009, when this program was being debated, it was a part of the health care bill, during the debate here in the United States Senate, Richard Foster said, and I quote again, 36 years of actuarial experience lead me to believe that this program would collapse in short order and require significant federal subsidies to continue, end quote. That was what they were saying, in 2009 before this vote ever occurred. And he also went on to say that this would end in quote again, an insurance death spiral, because the coverage would only be attractive to sicker people who would need costly services, and it would force premiums higher and deter healthy individuals from enrolling. So you had all the experts that were putting all this information out there and sharing this with their superiors, all of whom were out there on the record promoting this as being something that would work, and that's something that is not a budget gimmick, but actually could in fact pencil out and be actuarially sound. We all know now that it wasn't. It wasn't then, it isn't now, and that's why we ought to repeal it. So I would, again, I appreciate my colleagues' input and work on this. I think this is something that we really ought to just end it. I mean, we need to put the final touches on this program, end it once and for all, so that it doesn't come back in some other form and saddle future generations with trillions of dollars of additional unfunded liabilities and debt. There are ways that we can approach this issue. In fact, I've got some ideas that I introduced in 2007 that deal with long-term care and providing incentives for people to provide for that important need that we all are going to be faced with at some point, we hope, in our lives. But this is the wrong way. This was the wrong way. It was the wrong prescription at the beginning. It's the wrong prescription now. That's why it ought to be repealed.
Senator Thune, if I recall, you quoted Chief Actuary Richard Foster in his statement that this would collapse during the debate on the floor. This was talked about, but the administration and our Democratic colleagues just refused to listen. They continued to repeat the idea that they would have this large surplus, and they counted this money as surplus money in justifying voting for passage of this bill when common sense told us in a host of areas, including this one, it wasn't going to produce a surplus. And it goes to me something systemic about our problem and why this Congress, now I guess going into the third year, will be borrowing 40% of the money that the United States spends. It's because the politics is we want to pass the bill. And when somebody shows it's not actuarially sound and it's going to cost money in the out years, they don't worry about that. Somebody will take care of that in the out years. And it's that kind of mentality that I think is helped overrule common sense budgeting. We haven't had a budget now in over 900 years, 900 days in this United States Senate. And so this is not the kind of responsible approach to managing the taxpayers' money. And I know Senator Barrasso raised this repeatedly, that this should not be counted. But did we hear Secretary Sebelius at that time? She, back in 2009, wrote to Senator Kennedy and said to express administration support for inclusion of this bill, calling it an innovative bill. So they were supporting it, promoting it, totally ignoring the critics, and as a result, they got the bill passed on a straight party line vote. Matter of fact, I believe had Senator Brown from Massachusetts taken office 2 weeks sooner, there wouldn't have been the 60 votes necessary to pass it. It would only have been 59, and the bill would not be law today. So I just thank both of you for your consistent, steadfast explanation of the financial danger of this legislation, your willingness to continue to carry that fight on, and I hope we learn something throughout our whole budgetary and financial process here. We can't continue to play games with the American people's money. We've got to be honest with them. Honest about our budget, honest about what things are going to cost, and only then can we get the country on a sound footing.
We've got to quit making promises that we can't keep. And I think what we're seeing today in Europe and all the meltdown that's occurring in the economies over there are too many promises that were made, too much government debt, governments that have gotten too big that can no longer be supported by the economies in those countries. And that's where we're headed in those countries. And that's why we have got to start living within our means. We've got to quit spending money that we don't have. And this was a perfect example, I think, of the just the tendency around here to want to grow government, to have a government answer, a government solution for everything, when this makes matters not better but much worse, much worse for hardworking taxpayers in this country and for future generations of Americans for whom this would become an enormous liability, added already to the $528,000 that every family in this country owes, the mortgage that they have on their families already as a result of the unfunded liabilities that we've already racked up. We can't keep making promises that we can't keep. And so I hope that we can get this repealed, and I appreciate my colleagues' hard work in that regard, and look forward to getting an opportunity to get it voted on. I'm sorry that it was that our request this afternoon to repeal it was rejected, but I hope that we'll get another opportunity to revisit that and perhaps a vote that will actually put people on the record, because I do believe there are a majority of senators who agree with us on this point.
Mr. President, I would just say that just a couple of weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal, after all this happened, wrote that including this class act was a special act of fiscal corruption, close quote. Now, if a private business had done this, if a private business had said, invest in my company, I've got a plan that's going to be sound and going to make money in the future, and trust me, invest your money with me, vote for me, and they knew and had evidence in their files, and their own employees were saying it wasn't sound, it was actually going to cost money. Wonder what would happen to them, Senator Barrasso or Senator Thune?
Well, you know, you would hear about it a lot. And this speaks to the problems that we have in this body. When they write legislation in cloak of darkness, behind closed doors, you come in and vote at 1 in the morning, try to jam things through in a time an administration calls for openness and transparency, and then they do this sort of thing with the books and a manipulative way to try to come up with ways to say that it saves money. In any other true, real business, people would go to jail for this sort of behavior, I would assume. I mean, it is wrong, all the way wrong. We've seen other so-called bets that this administration has made, which have the American people scratching their head. And just yesterday it was noted that Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, bonuses have been paid to 10 of their executives to the tune of over $12 million. I've called for the President to cancel those bonuses. The White House is fairly silent on that. Yet when Senator Obama was running for President, he wrote a letter to the Treasury Secretary and said, make sure no bonuses go to Freddie and Fannie. Now, under his administration, $12 million, it was reported yesterday, went to 10 executives. Doesn't seem to be a problem now. He said the White House said there's nothing they could do about it. Well, why not get the Secretary of the Treasury involved? That's what candidate Obama did in 2008. It's time for this White House to stand up and do what's right.
Let me just say a little bit of an explanation of how this happened, the more accurate explanation. The Congressional Budget Office scored this as a surplus indeed over 10 years. And as Senator McCain said, the benefits only come out after 5 years, and these are younger people paying in, so the real benefits and payments take place in outer years. And the question is the plan sufficient to be actuarially sound for the distant future when the payouts really occur? So what happened was, Mr. Orzog, who'd been CBO director, he said it was not a gimmick and not a Ponzi scheme. Well, in one sense, he was telling the truth. He was using a window score from the Congressional Budget Office over the first 10 years when it didn't pay out any benefits and had a surplus to claim that this was going to make the bill itself financially sound. And in a sense, to me, it's these kind of gimmicks that might keep somebody from being prosecuted and sent to jail if they were a private person, that ought to end in the Congress. I think the American people are crying out for honesty in budgeting. They want us to be responsible. to tell them the good news, but to tell them the bad news financially that we face. And that they know we can't do things that we'd like to do if we don't have the money. And they know we don't have the money to keep taking on new obligations. So I just feel like that this is not healthy. Now, when Secretary Sebelius came along and had to certify that they had a 75-year actuarially sound program, no way she could do it. And it was just knocks a gaping hole into the entire scheme of this health care bill. And so I think it's a lesson for all of us on every vote we do. We need to be sure that we are honest not only in the short-term window, but in the long term also.
Too often the practice around here is focused on the short term, the near term, the gain, to be able to, have some sort of a political victory at the expense of what's in the best interests of this country and our children and grandchildren. This is a perfect example of that. And so I appreciate my colleagues being here, and this discussion will be continued. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
Senator from Louisiana.
Mr. President, I'd ask unanimous consent that Senator Sessions and I have up to 15...
Quorum call is in progress,
Excuse me,
Senator.
Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to vitiate the quorum call.
Without objection.
And now I ask unanimous consent that Senator Sessions and I have up to 15 minutes for a colloquy.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Senator Sessions and I come to the floor following discussion of a lot of important issues here on the floor to discuss the most important issue back home for us this week, which is the upcoming national championship game, regular season national championship game between LSU and Alabama. In the history of the SEC, this is the first ever regular season matchup between a #1 and #2 team in the SEC. As most folks probably know, LSU and Alabama are both 8-0 overall and 5-0 in the SEC. Now, obviously, I know who's going to win. The Tigers are going to win. They've beaten 5 ranked opponents this year, 3 of those away from home, as we're going to have to play Alabama. They've outscored all opponents 314 to 92 this year. And not to get cocky or anything, but LSU has beaten Alabama 8 out of the last 11 years, including 4 out of the last 5 times in Tuscaloosa. Now, we have a lot of strengths. Our senior quarterback, Jarrett Lee, leads the SEC in passing efficiency. We have a ferocious defense led by lineman Sam Montgomery and defensive backs Tyrann Mathieu and Mo Claiborne. Tyrann, by the way, is much better known as Honey Badger. And this is a prelude to the BCS Championship, which, by the way, is going to be in January in New Orleans in the Superdome. So we feel great going into this game, and that's why I was very eager to get with both senators from Alabama and have a friendly wager, which the Senator Alabama will explain. The loser is going to treat the winners to some great Gulf shrimp and other seafood. We feel great about it, so we'll look forward to it. And Senator Sessions, as I turn the floor over to you, I would just summarize our feelings in Louisiana in a simple way. You all have a great team, maybe one of the best Alabama teams ever, but it really doesn't matter who LSU's opponent is because, as we say in Louisiana, the Honey Badger takes what he wants, and we're looking forward to doing that on Saturday night.
Well, Senator Bitter, I thank you for those confident comments, and we're going to look forward to being very hospitable to the fabulous LSU fans that will be in Tuscaloosa for the Titanic tussle in Tuscaloosa, the game of the century, many are calling it, the match of the millennium between Alabama and LSU. It's always a big game, and it's going to be a big game, especially this year. And while we had a minute here on the floor and there's no other business being conducted, I just want to celebrate college football, particularly in the Southeastern Conference. When you go to those games and the color and the crowd and the enthusiasm and the roar for the home team, it's just a thrilling event. It's just very, very special, and the fans in Tuscaloosa are very, very sophisticated. They know this is a big game, one of the biggest games in the history of the University of Alabama. And they know when good plays are good and bad plays are bad. It's just going to be exciting. And they know LSU is consistently one of the great teams in America. So Alabama's doing pretty well. They're 8-0. Their all-star defense is #1 in scoring and #1 in total defense. They're #1 rushing defense in the country, allowing only 44 yards per game rushing, a historic number that ranks better than Alabama's national championship team in 1992 and the undefeated, untied 1966 team that was famous. So it's going to be a special time. And our university is a great university. The University of Alabama has been growing in strength for years now. It has one of the great presidents in America, Dr. Witt, and his my high school classmate, Judy Bonner, is the provost there, sister of Congressman Joe Bonner. And so it's an exciting time for the university in general. Academically and otherwise, the University of Alabama is doing great. It's one of its best periods in its history. I'd also like to point out and thank the LSU fans and chefs John Foltz and Rick Taramonto with Bob Baumhauer and Steve Zucker from Alabama for sponsoring the Louisiana Gumbo Bowl to benefit tornado victims in Tuscaloosa. That shows true class among both of the school's fan base. For all the talk that's going on this week, I do hope to see the kind of respect that this partnership indicates among all our fans. And while I don't think it will happen, should Les Miles and his team somehow manage to get out of Tuscaloosa with a victory, I'd love to treat you and Senator Landrieu to some of the finest Gulf seafood there is. Healthy and straight from the Gulf of Mexico, which you know is fresher and cleaner and finer than it ever has been, and maybe we could garnish it with some of that green grass that marks the field at Bryant-Denny Stadium. So I understand Les Miles is a fan, and I'd also be more than happy to bring you an Alabama tie on Monday after the game, which I think would really look good, Senator Vitter, if you wear it on the United States Senate floor.
Well, Mr. President, should the unthinkable happen, I will do that. And should the unthinkable happen, I will deliver fresh, healthy Gulf seafood to Senator Sessions' office as well as Senator Shelby's. We've been in contact with Senator Shelby's office and Senator Landry's office, and they're part of this friendly arrangement as well. So we'll look forward to that. But most of all, we'll look forward to a great game Saturday night, and we'll both look forward to a win Saturday night. One of us will have to be disappointed. We'll see who, but it's going to be a great game.
Thank you, Senator Vitter, for your friendship and good service here in the Senate. We worked on so many things together. But college football is a special, special thing, and I think the game this weekend will be one of the great games in college history. I'm so excited about it. I know fans in both our states and really throughout the country are excited about it.
Amen. Mr. President, with that, we yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
Senator from New Jersey.
I ask that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I came to the floor to speak about a different type of football. It seems to be the political football that we seem to have some of our colleagues playing on the question of getting America back to work again. And I am amazed at the political posturing that we have seen this year. I know for some of our colleagues on the other side, this election cycle has been driven by Tea Party economics that demand political purity over good governance. And they have said no to just about everything. And the problem with no to everything is that no doesn't create a job, no doesn't build an economy, no doesn't create prosperity, no doesn't get America moving again. And they have said no to every different venture that we have had to try to put America back to work, which certainly back in my home state of New Jersey, what I hear from the average citizen is, Senator, help me get back to work. Because I have New Jerseyans who come up to me, sometimes with tears in their eyes, and say, this is the first time in my life that I have been unemployed. And while that has created a significant economic consequence to them and their family, it has shaken something even more profound, which is that social contract, that promise in America that if I prepare myself, work hard, and sacrifice, I get ahead, and that my children will do better than I did growing up. And that has been shaken to the core by the economic challenges that, as a result of the crisis of 2008, that we have been working out of. So I have a problem every time we come to the floor to offer an opportunity to get those New Jerseyans, to get those Americans back to work, when all I hear is no. No to refuse to invest in rebuilding our infrastructure, to creating jobs, to keeping us competitive in a global economy. Now, they know that roads and highways and bridges in their states, in every state, are in critical need of improvement, and yet we have to come here time and time again, day after day, to fight back a politically charged, ideologically fueled opposition that says one thing but does another. The fact is, even those who oppose this legislation for political reasons know that good governance means investing in our future. It means putting Americans back to work. In an economy in which 70% of GDP is consumer demand, if there is no job, there is no money, and if there is no money, there is no demand. So in addition to the lives of New Jerseyans and Americans, which we could positively affect, this is about our global picture in terms of our economy. It means also keeping us competitive in this global economy. Let me talk about that global economy for a moment, because we're in it. We see what happens in Europe, and we see how we're affected here at home with our markets and whatnot, but let's look at a different place. Let's look at China. Let's look at the competition. According to China's 5-year plan, they have a range of investment priorities for the future. Clean energy technology, biotechnology, including pharmaceutical and vaccine production, high-tech equipment for manufacturing airplanes, a new space program, and satellites. In fact, this week they launched a satellite, the first step towards a China space station by the end of the decade. China is planning more high-speed rail, next-generation power plants and manufacturing facilities, new nuclear, solar, and wind energy technologies. The plan calls for building new energy efficiency cars and adding 9,000 kilometers to their highway system, expanding their national high-speed rail system to 45,000 kilometers, and building light rail systems in 21 urban metropolitan areas. They are planning 6 new heavy material ports, adding 440 new 10,000-ton shipping berths, a second Beijing airport, and 11 regional airports. This is some pretty stiff competition that will allow Chinese businesses to thrive. This is the challenge we have. Yes, we have a debt question in our country that we must meet that challenge. And there is no question that we should, we can, and we must. But by the same token, you need to grow this economy as part of meeting that challenge. An economy that was on the brink of ruin when this administration inherited. An economy that I'll never forget, that famous meeting, or infamous meeting of September 2008, that was called by the chairman of the Federal Reserve, where members of the Banking Committee and others were called to it. I remember going to it and listening to him describe a series of financial institutions that were on the verge of bankruptcy and collapse, and in doing so would have created systemic risk to the entire country's economy, and the verge, not of the Great Recession we've talked about a new depression. That is what we have been working out of. But even in this economy, we have to make investments and build for a competitive future. We invest just 2% of our gross domestic product on infrastructure projects. Europe and China invest between 5% and 9% respectively. Now, the President today called on Congress to up the ante. The American Jobs Act would invest $50 billion in our transportation infrastructure and $10 billion in a national infrastructure bank, putting hundreds of thousands of construction workers back on the job. But it's not just the construction workers, so certainly we want to get them back to work. It's all the architectural firms, all the engineering firms, all of the people who work at those firms who will help build out this infrastructure. It is all of the suppliers for all of the materials that will be needed to do this, and everybody who produces those supplies, and everybody who transports it, and everybody who installs it. So it is an enormous ripple effect in getting our people back to work. Hundreds of thousands waiting to work, working for America's future. Clearly, opposition to the Rebuild America Jobs Act is not about good governance, because we have ways, and we have offered ways, to pay for this fully. It's about politics. It's about playing political games, but it's playing political games with the lives and livelihoods of American families. Mr. President, while China is planning major investments in retooling for their new economy, we can't even seem to agree to fix our own roads. It's like the story of Nero fiddling while Rome burned, except American families and businesses are the ones that are going to get burned in this story. The President today released a report that highlights the importance of rebuilding our roads and bridges and railways and airports and has cited important projects around the country. They include over 17,000 jobs in New Jersey that would be put to work, making our future brighter. One of the projects the President's report highlights as an example of successes in New Jersey is the Route 52 Causeway Bridge replacement between Summers Point and Ocean City in Atlantic and Cape May counties. This is a critical emergency evacuation route for Ocean City during floods and hurricanes. The new bridge eliminates the need to raise the drawbridge at the old section that is still being replaced. This is a critical $400 million project that is an investment in New Jersey, in our community, in our infrastructure that will upgrade an old bridge to meet today's needs, protect the community, and put people to work. We can make these investments and still find ways to responsibly reduce the deficit. An investment is not even just about new projects, of course. It is about maintaining the very infrastructure that we have already spent money on in the past that we need to preserve for future use. 36% of New Jersey's bridges are structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. 78% of New Jersey's major roads are listed in poor or Medicare condition. 64% of New Jersey highways are chronically congested because of a 29% increase in vehicle travel on New Jersey's highways from 1990 to 2007. All of that, and we already have $13 billion worth of maintenance projects on hold because we don't have the money to pay for them. Now, those are just numbers in one respect, but those numbers are about lives. Because when you have infrastructure, major roads, major highways that are in bad condition, it means that you are sitting more time in traffic and less time being productive at work or having more quality time with your family. It means that businesses that have a product that they need to get to the marketplace are going over an infrastructure that means it's more timely. It takes longer to get that product to market. It has consequences. It adds to the costs. It creates an uncompetitive set of circumstances. It's about the quality of our life and our economy at the same time. The $13 billion is not to add even any capacity to New Jersey's transportation system. It's just to keep the status quo. And as I've said for quite some time, as we have attempted to work with my colleague Senator Lautenberg to build a new Trans-Hudson passenger rail tunnel, which is critically needed in that region. And we've learned since September 11th that multiple modes of transportation are incredibly important so that, God forbid, we have a tragedy again. We learned on that day when all the bridges were closed and all the tunnels were closed that ferries brought people out of downtown Manhattan to New Jersey to ultimately be taken to hospitals. Multiple modes of transportation and options are critical for our economy. They're also critical for our security. And yet we can't even keep up to date that which we have, much less create a new Trans-Hudson tunnel that would open up the entire region and the economic opportunities. You know, you can't grow if you're stuck. And in that region, as in many regions of the country, we are stuck. We can begin the long overdue process of maintaining, rehabilitating, and replacing if we pass this legislation. We can do it if we act together as a nation, as we did in 1956. In 1956, it was a Republican administration that created the interstate highway system. And now we can't seem to get one Republican to vote to maintain that system. In 2011, we can't get one Republican to vote to keep us and to help us keep competitive and put Americans back to work. We need our Republican colleagues in Congress to end the roadblock and fix the roads. They need to vote yes to providing every state with the resources they need to repair and rebuild aging roads and bridges and put people back to work. Think of the jobs that we could create nationwide if we publicly committed to investing enough to keep up and stay competitive with the Chinas of the world. Even if China is able to meet only a fraction of its ambitious goals, it will be far beyond the course we are presently on. In 1956, I want to go back to that history, under a Republican president, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Congress passed the Federal Aid Highway Act. It took 35 years, but we committed this nation to building 46,876 miles of highway, one of the largest public works projects at that time in the nation's history. Why? Because a young Army officer, Dwight Eisenhower, saw the need. He drove across the country in an Army convoy that left Washington on July the 7th, 1919, went to Gettysburg, and took the old Lincoln Highway to San Francisco. On the journey, bridges cracked and had to be rebuilt, vehicles got stuck in the mud, equipment broke, and they didn't arrive on the West Coast. They left July 7th. They didn't arrive on the West Coast until September 6th. A 2-month journey that gave birth to the American interstate highway system. Let's not be so short-sighted that we will turn back the clock to the days of the old Lincoln Highway. Mr. President, I understand the need to reduce our deficit, and these provisions that I've talked about that I support are paid for. But I do not understand the blind commitment to doing nothing, refusing to invest in our future and create American jobs in the process, and calling it good governance. Good governance is what President Eisenhower did when he signed the Federal Highway Act into law. And now it's up to us to invest in maintaining it. Let's be honest with ourselves about the fact that good governance means investing in our nation, in our people, in our progress, in our prosperity, in our future. Investing in our infrastructure is an investment in our country and in our future. Let's put today's ideologically driven politics aside and recall the practical Republican politics of President Eisenhower, who saw a national need and had the will and the wisdom to put the nation to work to build it. And so I ask my colleagues, where is the grand old Republican Party that united America behind an interstate highway system and put government and people to work to make it happen? Mr. President, if we put aside the ideological posturing, if we put aside the suggestion that I have heard many times that the major goal here is, by some of our Republican colleagues, is to make Barack Obama a one-term president and then ultimately use both the filibuster to stop progress here in the Senate and or use a constant no vote to stop progress for the nation under the guise that that's the way that President Obama will fail. The problem with that is that that's really, at the end of the day, in my mind, not about President Obama failing. That's about the nation failing at one of its most critical times in our country's history, and it's one of the most critical times in our economy. And so if we can put aside the ideological posturing, if we can put aside the political strategy and gamesmanship, if we are honest with ourselves about what good governance means and what it means to American families to invest in creating jobs and keeping us globally competitive so that we can continue to grow that economy and create other jobs for individuals that will help them realize their hopes and dreams and aspirations, that will help them contribute to the nation, that will create new revenues that will be part of meeting our debt challenge, we would pass this legislation and make it happen. That's the opportunity before the Senate. It is one that I hope our colleagues would grasp. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor and observe the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President,
Senator from Alabama.
I'd ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection, it shall be.
Mr. President, earlier today, my friend and colleague from Illinois, Senator Durbin, came to the floor and criticized wrongly, I believe, my state of Alabama and the state of Arizona for something that I would think we would all want every state and locality to do, and that is to cooperate in the enforcement of federal immigration law. Alabama and Arizona are undertaking a legitimate effort in attempting to help enforce the laws of the United States when this administration too often has failed to do so. The American people and the rule of law in our country have suffered as a result. This administration has flatly refused to enforce our national laws, generous immigration laws that they are, despite the fact that there is on the books extensive and a fair code of laws designed to facilitate substantial legal immigration into our country. Moreover, the Obama administration is systematically going after states that attempt to assist. Arizona, Alabama, now South Carolina, Indiana next. Even more egregious, I think, is the administration has refused to take any action against states and localities that affirmatively, proactively, and intentionally impede the immigration enforcement in the United States. Now, these jurisdictions include San Francisco County, Santa Clara County, Washington, D.C., and perhaps the most egregious example, Cook County, Illinois, which recently passed an ordinance directing local Illinois law enforcement officials to ignore U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement detainers. The detainers are sent to local jails, and they request that officials at those jails detain illegal aliens for an additional 48-hour period, statutorily provided, after the jurisdiction ceases, after that local jurisdiction's business over that immigrant ceases, so that an ICE officer may place an alien into federal custody. And this is done on all kinds of crimes throughout the country. People are arrested in Alabama. Georgia has charges against them. They send the detainer over. Somebody's arrested in Illinois. The federal government has a charge against them. They place a detainer. So when they are finished in that trial or their sentence, before they're released out on the street, they're turned over to the other jurisdiction. Maybe it's a murder charge. Maybe it's a serious felony charge. This happens every day in America. It's common practice. If it were to cease, law enforcement in this country would be dealt a devastating blow. But in other words, Cook County has decided that it gets to decide who gets deported from the country and when, and acting in this way undermines directly federal law enforcement. When testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee last week, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano said, incredibly, that she has had no contact with Cook County and has had no discussions with the Attorney General of the United States on this issue. So today, I and Senators Grassley, Cornyn, and Coburn sent a letter to Secretary Napolitano, and we requested that she and others in the administration consider taking action against Cook County and other local jurisdictions that purposely and deliberately undermine the laws of the United States and offer sanctuary to illegal aliens who have broken our laws by entering the country illegally. Is there no consequence to that in this country now? If that's so, aren't we in fact putting up a sign on our borders that said, just get by the border and you're home free and nothing will ever happen to you? Isn't that a magnet to more illegal immigration? Isn't that a mixed message to the world? Don't we need to be sending a good and decent message? That is, we believe in immigration. We're a nation of immigrants. We have the most generous immigration laws in the world, but you must comply with them. We can't accept everybody that would like to come whenever they'd like to come. We have to ask people to file applications, meet certain qualifications, and come when your time comes to come to America. That's what law is all about. That's why people want to come to this country, frankly, because in their countries they have no law. And they don't have the opportunity to earn something and be able to keep it. So the implementation of this ordinance so since the implementation of this ordinance in Chicago, over 40 suspected illegal aliens arrested on felony charges have been released from Cook County jails. Last week, the Executive Associate Director of Enforcement and Removal Operations at the Federal Department of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, told my staff that Cook County presents a major problem for immigration enforcement efforts. In fact, he said that Cook County, Illinois, is the most egregious example of sanctuary city policies and is, quote, an accident waiting to happen, close quote. And yet the head of the Department of Homeland Security stands silent. And the Justice Department is too busy prosecuting states that are trying to cooperate and uphold the law of the United States. Senator Durbin says that no state is above the law, but it's the sanctuary jurisdictions like Cook County and not states like Alabama and Arizona and South Carolina and Indiana that need to remember they are not above the law. The truth is that this is yet another example of a long-time trend in Chicago of elected officials placating immigration lawbreakers while thumbing their nose at federal law enforcement, jeopardizing public safety, and pretending that what they do is honorable and good and for the taxpayers who elected them. But releasing dangerous criminals is a dangerous thing to do. Releasing dangerous criminals could be a person who goes and murders somebody, as we've seen time and time again. The Cook County Commission passed this ordinance less than a month after the Chicago-based Open Borders Group, National Immigrant Justice Center, sued the Department of Homeland Security challenging the constitutionality of these ICE detainers, things that have been done by every state, city, and county throughout America for decades, hundreds of years, since the founding of the Republic, I suppose. The lawsuit undoubtedly influenced the Cook County Commissioners. They decided to be open about it and voted in favor voted in favor of this ordinance. So if one of those illegal aliens arrested on felony charges and released by Cook County commits a crime now, Cook County officials are to blame for it. You should not release someone when the federal authorities place a detainer on them, because they don't do that very often. They don't do it nearly enough, frankly. But there'll be a good reason for sure if they placed a detainer on them, and to ignore that is really stunning to me. So sanctuary jurisdictions like Cook County, Illinois, undermine the ability of law enforcement personnel to enforce the laws that are on the books now and represents a threat to our security. These jurisdictions cannot choose if and when they will turn over illegal alien charged with a crime and wanted by ICE. So if we're going to talk about who is and who isn't above the law, I suggest that my good friends, we work together on a number of things, some of them criminal justice issues. And the senator from Illinois needs to clean up his own backyard rather than casting unfounded criticisms on states that are taking up a valuable effort to see that our immigration laws actually are enforced, to help end the lawlessness that has caused so much disruption in our country and upset by the American people. American people are not anti-immigrant. We're a nation of immigrants. American people are not opposed to people being able to come to our country. The American people don't dislike people that are here. Their anger, basically, is addressed to those of us in authority who are failing to maintain a lawful system of immigration, one that we can be proud of, one that is consistently enforced throughout the country. I believe that's what we should be striving for in our nation. And if somebody wants to change the law and allow more people to come or less people to come, let's vote on it, have it right here on the floor of the Senate, and maybe we can have some changes. But fundamentally, it's duty of Homeland Security, it's the duty of the Department of Justice to enforce the laws as they exist. They don't get to make the laws and enforce them. And it's the duty and responsibility of Cook County to participate with the federal government in fulfilling its basic duties, such as honoring detainers. And when you don't have that, we've got a real problem in our country. So I would suggest that the Attorney General take a little time out from his lawsuit against Arizona or Alabama or other states and focus a little bit of his attention on a major jurisdiction like Cook County, who is willfully and deliberately acting to undermine federal law enforcement. I thank the chair and would yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka,